Here we go. We'll get formally started. Let me just share my screen. So I'll give you guys a very quick background on why we're doing this today. If you were not at our last session, which was about 6 months ago, we were asked after before the last Canada Games, just to share a little bit more information with our Atlantic Canadian coaches about preparation for the games. So the feeling from our coaches across Atlantic Canada was that there was information that they weren't given that they could have been given, or things they could have learned more about, had the conversations around ahead of the games. And that's where a group like us, so I'm at the Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic in Halifax, we have access to pulling a group of coaches together through our partners at Coach New Brunswick, Coach PEI, Coach Newfoundland, and ourselves here in Nova Scotia. So we tackled and took on running a little education series to give information to coaches before the last games. What we learned out of that was that we needed to spread it out over a longer time, give the coaches more time to think, digest, and ask questions, and give you guys more time to get you some of the information as it came in to be timely and allow you to, put in place the things that we were talking about. So that welcomes us to the 2025 Coach Enhancement Series. We did start the first one, like I said, 6 months ago in about February. That recording was sent out to you ahead of time if you didn't have a chance to look at it. And that last session really focused on team selection, starting to think about who's going to be on your team and what your team's going to look like, and a few kind of more general 18-month out practices and best practices that we've learned. Today's session, we're now 11 months out from the games, which I'm sure many of you are very aware of. But we're 11 months out from St. John's, depending on, which week you land in. And so today's session is really about planning for performance. So what can we do over the next 11 months to get your teams to reach the goals that they have set for themselves? So why am I the one talking today? So my name's Natasha Johnson. Like I said, I work at the Sport Institute. I am our director of coaching at the Institute. So I get the pleasure of working with basically anyone who's at about a Canada Games level up to our Olympic coaches. So that's why I'm so excited to always get to see and meet this group, or I guess see the names today, which is fine. My background with Canada Games. So where's my experience coming from when I'm speaking on this, as well as collecting it from all the coaches I get to talk to all the time, which is one of the primary ways that we learn. So you guys are the brains in the room right now, and we do listen and take feedback from all of the coaches we get to talk to. As you can see here, from across 4 provinces, we gather a lot of learning, and then I get to share sort of learning across different groups. As well as I was lucky to be in Newfoundland actually as an athlete at the 1999 Canada Games myself in gymnastics. And then I went on to start coaching snowboarding, coached 3 snowboard Canada Games. So I got to coach over like a 12-year window, got to see how 3 cycles connect and worked, aiming with Canada Games. And in that experience, I got to see 2 cycles where we, planned really well and came in and medaled, and had multiple medals in those games. And then there was a Canada Games where we planned really well. We peaked too early, and I had some pretty bad injuries, and we missed the podium in that last game. So I learned a lot from that that I'll use in today's session as well. And then more relevant for your experience as a summer coach, I had the opportunity to coach a Canada Summer Games in my other sport of softball, which showed me what the summer games looks like, different factors, heat, different time of year. Definitely planning looks a little bit different. Outdoor field sport versus, waiting for snow. So use that experience as well. And then lastly, at the last Canada Games in PEI, I was a mission staff, which is certainly a different role than coaching, but I was speaking mostly to coaching today, of course. Okay. I am only going to keep you guys for the hour, so there may be points where I have a decent amount of information to share with you today. Last night we were bang on the hour, and I will respect that time. If we have time for questions, great. If not, what I will do is stay on, or you can always reach me. I'll give you my contact information at the end. If I seem to be going a little too fast for someone, just pipe up. So either like jump in, totally fine for you to just either put your hand up or unmute and stop me, or you can use the chat. I don't always see the chat right away, but I'll try and keep an eye on it. We're going to start off with just a couple framing questions really that I have for you guys, and a framing around the Canada Games and why it's a little different than other events. So I would expect that most of you have been very involved in your sports as far as, either coaching or managing and traveling with teams. And so from talking to coaches, the average experience going to Canada Games of our coaches are coaches who've been to a few national championships in their sport or similar events. So maybe it's an Eastern Canadians or a whatever that is, half Canada type event, junior national event, something of the sorts. So I have heard from coaches time and time again, well, Canada Games is basically just a junior national championships for my sport. Why is there such a big deal being made out of it? That is true. The competition within your sport is probably about a junior national level event. However, the event itself is much different than a national championships for a single sport because of the large size of the event, the thousands of athletes, how the logistics are run. It's different in that you do not control most aspects of it. So from my experience over, I think I did almost 15 national championships in my sport coaching as a head coach. I was in control of planning my travel, planning my schedule, where I stayed, where we ate, how I transported the athletes to and from the championships. You do not get to do any of that, or very little of it, with Canada Games. So we're going to talk a lot about planning today, and I want you guys thinking about the things that you don't have full control over. You still have some control, but things like the cafeteria, when the hours are, what they're serving for food, when you can go, how to access it. Transportation, what it looks like, normally buses, and the times of those transportations, meeting spaces. So there's normally meeting spaces, but they do have to be booked. They may not be exactly where you're staying, those sort of more logistical things. There's a lot of athlete activities at Canada Games. So I know some of you are multi-games coaches. Some of you are first-time games coaches. For the first-time games coaches, what I'm going to say to you is that it's a lot busier for the athletes than a national championship, because you suddenly have thousands of athletes the same age as your athletes, and they're all buzzing around, and there's all this excitement. So there's an athlete's village. There's just more for them to generally do, which can be a distraction from what you're trying to do as the coach and get them prepared for competition. And then there's factors like laundry, which I have some great information I'm going to share with you in a bit. So I'm just going to challenge you guys as we go through this and as we move out of today to start getting acquainted with the information that you're curious about. You can find a lot of this online, asking what these things look like. Start to think about how the week is going to be now and start to get curious. And like I said, start to get curious as we go through the next few slides with some of this in mind. So the last session as well, we talked a lot about communication and the fact that, clear, regular communication can get ahead of a lot of selection problems, for example, was more specifically what we talked about. Now, what I want to make sure that we come back to and highlight over the next 11 months is a reminder of how is that communication going out to the athletes over the next big period that you have. So has the communication been in writing, and is it in writing, ensuring that some copy of it, so if it's verbal to the athletes and parents, that you then follow up in writing so that you have record of everything that was said and nothing can be changed. It's what you exactly wrote. Is the communication to the parents and athletes when the athletes are of underage? So if the athletes are under 18 or even under 19, are you copying the parents to ensure that they are also looped in at the same time? Or separately, you could do it separately if you want to do parent-only communication, just ensuring that parents of youth athletes are engaged and have the information required about their children. And then the obvious, making sure it's as clear and detailed as possible. The next piece that's so important when we see with our teams that do a really great job, and then the coaches who tend to get into some issues with maybe some conflict, one of the big difference makers is which of the two coaches set clear expectations from the start. So now is the time for you to implement your expectations over the next 11 months or from now until the games. So Have you talked about that with the team? Have you talked about your expectation of what it looks like to be an athlete in your program from now until the games? Have you talked about that with the coaches? Have you talked about that with the parents? Have you talked to the athletes about what the attitudes and work ethic expectations are from now until the games? Have you talked about during the games? So a big question that'll come up now is that week of the games, what is your or your team's plan and expectation for technology use, access to their family and friends, and their schedule? And when talking about access to family and friends, that one seems like a little bit of a weird one, but it can actually be a huge factor. And I'll say, I know there's a couple of Newfoundland coaches on the line. This one becomes the biggest factor for you guys because you're the host province. So we saw this when we were hosting in Halifax, that suddenly it's a Canada Games that's different than other Canada Games because everybody's friends and families are there, or a lot of them are there, and they can come and show up to the event. So setting the expectation now for my Newfoundland friends, when can they see family and friends? What does that look like? Because you're just going to have more pressure on your athletes to be drawn and pulled from these people. And then because it's an Atlantic Games, you'll still see more family there than perhaps a Yukon Games. So really setting the expectations. When can the athletes go for dinner with their family? Is there a night in the week of the games that you do not have training? You don't need to do video review. You don't need to have a team meeting, or you can have it early and you can let the athletes leave that night. Or maybe not. Some of the sports have very intense schedules, and maybe the expectation is just set now to the families. There is no access during that week. That I leave fully up to you to explore, but I just ask that you're setting that expectation now. And then as well as the schedule, and I don't mean just the schedule during the games, but also as we'll talk about the schedule over the next 11 months. And then, of course, as quickly mentioned, setting the expectation for the parents as well, so that they really understand what the ride over the next 11 months will be, because it's going to be a busy time. So what I really promised to give you guys today, and what I'll focus the bulk of the time for, and I'll slow down a little bit, is planning thoughts. So we are now 11 months out. What should we be doing for planning? What should our programs look like? The next two slides are a little bit data heavy, or like information heavy. There's two really great graphics. I will be sending this out to you, so don't panic when you see this and try and jot it all down. These are very helpful tools that I'll be sending out for you to use. They're not meant for you to just grab this slide now and totally understand it. So don't hit the panic button. Okay, so the first one, what is the perfect plan? So you now have 11 months. How are we going to plan over the next 11 months to get your team to the goal, or your individual athletes to the goal that they want to have at the games? This quote is so beautiful. So planning is the most valuable resource a coach has at his or her disposal. By using a well-organized and proven process like periodization, the coach can construct a training timeline that allows each athlete to optimize performance at the optimal times. This is very true. The coaches that we see at the Olympic level down to the provincial level that spend the time planning, that do a good job with their planning and put work into it and do it correctly, do have success. This is well researched, and there's lots of articles out there that you can read, and things on the internet about how to periodize. I do share two articles, two full-length ones in this presentation, so you're going to have those links if you want to dive in and get some more information. But I found this one graphic a pretty good summary of the first part that I'm going to talk you through. So what this talks you through is a full season. And then I stuck those little gold, silver, bronze medals up there because that line, that last dash line, that's you peaking at the most important time of your season, which for many of you next year is going to be the Canada Games next summer. So how are we going to get our athletes to reach their goal next summer? How's the team going to reach their goal? Well, how are we going to hit ourselves at that peak at that line? Well, you'll see we'll go back to where we are right now. We are at that strange turquoise colored arrow right at the start of the preparatory period. So now is the time to start thinking about am I planning to make this peak happen? And does my plan look a little bit like this graph? So just roughly looking through this graph, we have our preparatory period, which you're in right now or you're heading into. So I know I spent all weekend on the baseball field myself and with my daughter. So for some of you, you're just wrapping up your season. Some of the field sports will continue for a few more weeks, but then you're done. You'll take your transition rest and you'll head into your preparation period. So some of you are already there. Some of you are heading into that at this time. Most of us will be there in the next month. So we've got a decent preparatory period over kind of this fall for all of us, summer sport. That would be our prep period. Then we move into our transition period. So we've got like end of winter or midwinter into spring. We're in our transition period. And then we move into our competition period, which is really an important time for us. So what should you be doing in each of these periods? And I want you to start thinking about that as a coach is my general plan meeting these general practices? So what that would mean right now over the next few months is that we have high volume. So high quantity of training, a middle quality, so a mid intensity, and then pretty low technical training. So in practical terms, what the heck does that look like? That looks like the athlete spending a lot of time doing general fitness. So it's building the engine again or rebuilding the engine after a recovery period, building general strength, doing, going for a run, building our breathing system. And so high volume, not super high intensity, kind of mid intensity. And it probably means when the technique is so low there, it probably means they're not out on the field with you very much. There may be programs online right now who don't have touch with their athletes, like don't have regular contact with their athletes to do any technical training over the next bunch of months. And that is okay. What that could be is a once a month or once every 2 week Zoom call with the team to start talking about, here are the systems that I'm going to build with my team. Here are some of the tactics that I want you as athletes to be aware of. And that could look more like a general education sessions about, here are the things we want to look to do with our team. And here's, schooling of the game of how I'm going to coach you when we do hit the field or the pitch or whatever it is. For individual athletes, same thing. This period may be building the engine, and the education may be more around getting to know the athlete's goals, what motivates them, having some real one-on-one time with those individual athletes to understand how you're going to carry them through the rest of the season. When you're hitting transition period, this is where it gets a little harder to nail it, just because everything's kind of, you're in a transition. You're in a transition period. So you're starting to bring total volume down a little bit, but you're probably, and I hope, you're seeing the athletes more because you're starting to ramp up intensity. You're starting to use the engine that they've built and be able to add load, add stress to it, add real sport aspects to it. And therefore, you're starting to get on the pitch, on the field, and doing your sport. You're doing your technical training. So that starts to ramp up. Then you get into your competition phase, which will be, the weeks before the games. You're playing your game lots. Volume is down, so you're hopefully not training as much. You're spending the time in a high intensity competition environment that looks more like the games. You're doing things under stress. You're putting load on. And then you're giving a rest. So you've got a little taper. That's what that little drop off is right before the line there. So you've given your athletes a drop in everything, and in intensity, a massive drop in volume before the games in order to make sure that they are rested and at their best before they peak at the games. So what does that look like when you're like, oh my goodness, okay, that sounds great. Yep, theory is great. How the heck do I put that into a plan? This is one of the most useful tools that I've seen to translate all of the theory around planning and practically put it into a plan. So I'm going to kind of talk you guys through this, and then I'll open it up to some questions. So I talked about last session, if you were here, there's 10 or what a mesocycle is. There's now 10 or 11 mesocycles left. Simple terms, a mesocycle is about a month block. So you choose, 4 to 5 weeks, and that's a block of time that you're going to plan through. That's how many blocks you have left before the games. If you're looking at microcycles or your weeks, you have about 48 weeks. So what I want you to start doing right now are thinking about what are the things you're trying to change in that time. So if I were to ask you right now, maybe you can scribble it down. What are the couple things that you want to change about your team or your athletes? What are the things you want to get done from now until the games? And what I'm going to hope is that you don't have 25 things on your list because you only have 10 blocks. So in theory, you really only have time to do 10 major things, and you may not even have time to do 10 if they're really truly major and they may take 2 to 3 blocks to develop, like a difficult technical skill, for example. So starting to think about what does that look like? Do I have time? And what are my priorities? So if I'm looking at my 10 blocks, what are the priorities and which one fits in which block? So figuring out which one fits in which block and what does that look like, that's where you're going to use this little chart from Durham University. So I want you to start at the, well, I'll talk you through kind of both ways. You're going to start working back at the games, which is at the bottom of this competition arrow down to the left-hand side, the bottom of the 33 weeks. So that's about at the Canada Games. So then I want you to creep yourself back through your planning and go up every block and start thinking about what do I need to happen in each of these blocks. So in my competition build up, which is about 3 weeks out from the games, what does that look like? Am I in a tournament at that time, which would be super helpful? Am I away at a major competition, which would be helpful? What am I doing to kind of, that's your period to test. Are we ready? Do we have what it takes? In the 6 weeks before that, in the pre-competitive part of your season, have you spent the time in that 6 weeks bringing your athletes up to their peak condition? Have you prepared them for competition in that time? Have you done some maybe mock competitions or less important competitions in that time to make sure that you've tested where your athletes are? And have they gotten to practice your sport under pressure, competition pressure? Going back again, you've got 3 weeks approximately for your build up. So this is you're building up your training load. You know, you're doing a little more specific sport training, less general training. And I just want you, there's a couple more blocks you can work up from there around kind of preparation phases. If you look from basic sport specific all the way down to Canada Games, you have about 33 weeks that you're really carefully planning out from the games in order to really peak. So if you're starting to think, okay, when's that? That's just around Christmas. So basically you've got to plan carefully from, we'll say January 1st or just after Christmas break until the games. That's your like peak time to focus on your athletes, have a good plan in place and follow this process. From now until the Christmas break, that's that very first line. That's your general preparation phase. This is where you have time. So you currently have about 15 weeks from now until December 23rd. In that time, what you should be doing with your athletes is getting them to do general education about your sport and developing basic fitness. Again, that doesn't have to be with you. That could be with a club program. That could be them off away at university if they're playing their sport. That could be them off at university or high school somewhere, on a strength program, on a general fitness program. They're busy doing volume. This is the time when they're less busy with you doing general contact. So this is your time. And what I'll ask all of you guys to do is to think about over the next few weeks, this is your time to plan. So this call couldn't have been at a better time because this is the block of time that is the best point in order to start looking at, do I have the information I need? Have I taken the time to plan out the next 33 weeks starting in January? Is it all going to work out for me? You also don't necessarily need 15 weeks of general prep. Depends on the athlete. It's better to give them a little bit of a break right now. Excuse me. And then have them do like a 10 to 12 week preparation phase than to have them come right off the season and go right back into general fitness training. So making sure that you've thought about that, like where did you just come out of your season and what are you getting into? Once you've worked backwards, like I said, double checking working forwards and making sure that you've planned all your blocks so that they do work together and that your 10 goals all connect together. And I'll get into that more in a second. I just want to briefly stop and ask if there's any questions on the last kind of like 2 slides. So this is really structuring your plan and thinking about now until next summer. Do you have any questions? And I can do chat or unmute. Nope, you guys are all like, I got this. We're good. Okay. Oops. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is work forward. So now you've got your plan and you've got your blocks in and you're happy with it. Start to work forward with a perspective of tactics and technical development. So from now until the games, what ideas or skills have to be stacked to meet your Canada Games goals? So for some of your sports, I think I saw artistic swimming on here. I'm trying to see if I see any other artistic based sport. No, okay, I'll give an example for artistic and then we'll do a team sport example. So these are things like for an artistic sport and some of our other, sorry, I should preface, some of our other sports, this you could still definitely draw the parallels here. So there are, especially in these sports, there are specific technical things that have to happen. You have to be able to do them before you step on to the next level of things. So one of the examples that I'll give that I've seen run into in the Canada Games is an individual athlete saying, okay, my goal for Canada Games is to come in the top 3 females in, we'll say, half pipe snowboarding. Great, that's a great goal. To get there, if you look across the country, that female would have to be doing, say, back-to-back 9s, just as an example. So they'd have to do a 900 to a 900. Okay, great. Does the athlete do that now? No. Okay, we have 10 blocks to get them there. And we're not going to be on snow for a whole whack of those blocks. So has the coach thought about what has to be stacked? When's the athlete going to learn 3 to 3, 5 to 5, 5 to 7, 7, 7? You know, do they have enough time? And what I've seen happen with coaches is when they start to change their perspective and put that into place, you could run out of time. So another example from like, say, a team field sport is there a certain tactic that you want to implement, and does your team have the skills yet to do it? So I want to implement play blank. It's going to really fool the other team. Awesome. Does my team understand it? No. Okay, let's go back. When am I going to teach them? When do they get to practice that play? Then have I had time to put it into pressure situations? So have I used it against other competitive teams? Okay, that's going to take some time. Before any of that happens, do the players even have the skills in order to execute the play? Maybe not. So have I built that in? So I want you to really start thinking about what ideas or skills have to be stacked, and have you, this is like the real intricate planning, have you blocked those skills and built enough time for that to happen? One example that I've seen on the baseball field is I think I've had a couple baseball coaches on, is a play where runners on first and third, you have a ball going to second, you have the shortstop cut off the ball and fire it back to home, trick the players and try and get the person at home. Great play when it works, but sometimes coaches will jump to, we're going to try this play, and we haven't even worked on, like, can the catcher accurately get the ball to second base, and can the shortstop make the cutoff and throw the ball back accurately enough? Because if those skills haven't been perfected yet, the whole play goes to heck really fast. So have all the little pieces been put into place, and not trying to implement some of this stuff at the games because it's going to fall apart. Ensuring that you've tested it in practice, you've tested it in competition, you've tested it in pressure competitions situations, and that it's really solid. So what oftentimes will happen, you'll get this done, you'll put your plan into place, and you'll realize you might not have time for everything you thought you were hoping to achieve, and that's totally okay. So is there a plan B? Is there maybe some adjustments made to expectations? Whatever it is, maybe you'll do it and you have lots of time, and then you can add some more time in for other skills and tactics. That would be ideal, I mean. But it is common that what happens is you put this in place and you realize you might not have as much time as you thought you did. better to know that now than to run out of time before the games and not be happy with how the planning went. So I'll challenge all of you to do what's in the bold. Do you have enough time to achieve what you want to achieve between now and the games? And have you looked at it? And if you haven't, look at it now. The last point here is a question for everyone. Have you tracked training volumes for Canada Games before? So if you're a second or third or fourth time Canada Games coach, great. Did you track your training volumes, and have you gone back and looked at them and looked at, were there issues? Did I like what happened? Can I switch and train and change how it's going to work for this time? I learned quite a bit. It was really nice getting to coach 3 different game cycles for one sport, because I did get to look back at my training volumes and adjust. And I think it was my second games. 2 of my medalists, of course, did really well. They medaled, but both experienced burnout right after the games. So that was a really good learning for me in that year. That year did end up with a peak performance at Canada Games, but then I had a really long drawn out recovery period that didn't work for anybody because they had overtrained and hit a point of burnout. So it was a huge learning for me that next time, okay, like, you overdid it, don't do that. So especially for my multi-games coaches, like, have you tracked it? Have you gone back and looked and really done a critical analysis of, like, did that work? Did it really work? How do I know it worked? What am I doing differently this time? Or what am I adjusting? And if this is your first time as a Canada Games coach, do you have access to the last coach? Can you talk to them? Can you reach out to them? Or an assistant coach who might know what this looked like? And can you get a little bit of that information? Because I hate to see, but it happens all the time, our coaches starting from scratch, like, yay, I'm the Canada Games coach, and they don't speak to the last coach, and we have relearning happening again and again and again. So ideally, get a hold of that last coach if you have access to them and get some of those learnings. The last piece to kind of integrate into your plan is really important, and that's getting to know the specifics about where you're going and the environment that you're going to get to go in. We do this with Olympic sport as well. So if you've heard about, going to the Olympics or Paralympics, the athletes and coaches try to get to know every little thing about what the Olympic Village is going to look like, what the bedding is going to look like, what the competition venue looks like, absolutely everything, because it takes out the number of factors that end up being in play once you're there. So more certainty about exactly what things will look like. You will always come across uncertainty, and us and our athletes have to be okay with that and comfortable with it. But we also want to know as much as we can and be able to show the athletes so they can accurately dream about it and think about what it'll feel like, what it'll look like, immerse themselves in what it'll be like in St. John's. So I'm going to challenge you guys today to think about, what do you know about St. John's? For those of you in Newfoundland, amazing. I hope you know a lot and you're like, I got this. That's part of why there's home field advantage. Because you don't have to worry about those things. You can go maybe experience some of these venues more easily than others. And what do you know about your venue? What do you know about your accommodations? So this example, this bunk bed was in PEI. Do you know what your accommodations are going to look like for the games? Do you have your competition schedule yet? I know some sports do, some sports, oh, there's a typo too. That says complete. When do you complete? No, when do you compete? If you don't have your schedule yet, they are coming out shortly. And then things like, when will you eat? So when you're looking at that final week of the games, are you competing all day? When are the breaks in the day that you're going to get to the cafeteria and eat? What does that look like? Have you thought about transportation time, then meal hall time, then getting to the games? It adds extra time at the games because you've got to go to a cafeteria with hundreds, if not thousands of people. You've got to grab transportation. So have you thought about these additional things that take time when you're at a Canada Games versus when you're kind of on your own at a nationals? And what I'm going to do right now, we were so lucky last night to have Bianca join us on the call. She is not here with us today, but I have some notes that I'm going to share with you guys. She is one of the managers of sport with the 2025 Canada Games Host Society in Newfoundland. And some of our sports, and probably most of you, don't yet have their mission staffs in place. So a lot of this information was brand new to our coaches online last night, which is why I'm so excited to be able to bring it to you guys now and get some of this information to you 11 months out that many of you may not have otherwise gotten into closer to the games. And I might be able to answer questions, but I'll give you the general information she gave us. This is not in my slides, so if you want to jot down what's relevant to you, or if someone needs a copy, I can kind of send them my scribbles from last night. So what she shared with us is that all teams, coaches, and athletes will be staying in the MUN dorms. There are 3 dorms. So she basically explained it that there's like an older dorm building, a medium building, and a newer building. The max in a dorm is 6 people per room. Most rooms, you guys are so lucky, most rooms will be 1 to 2 athletes per room. So that's a really nice factor. You know, in the Yukon, I think there was like, I don't know, we were jammed in like sardines. There was a ton of people in a room. So nice for you guys to know now, 1 to 2 athletes per room. There are some, it's a mix depending on the building that your province gets placed in. So the biggest rooms are actually apartment style, where she said there would be like 3 or 4 separate rooms with 1 to 2 athletes and a shared space with a bathroom. And then other ones are more classic dorm style, where there'll just be rooms with 1 or 2 athletes and then shared washrooms in a hallway. So like 1 set of shared washrooms on a hall. There is no air conditioning in any of the dorms. However, they have purchased fans for every single room. So every room will have access to a fan. The temperatures range, the information I was given is it could go from about 15 to 25, like easily. It could go between those ranges in this time. So bit of a mixed bag for weather. Hopefully not too crazy hot. The fan will be fine. The dorms have laundry on every floor, which is amazing. So she said she does not foresee any issues with laundry. They are like paid laundry machines, but there have been games when getting to laundry is a big pain. So hopefully you guys are happy and lucky to have access to laundry at this games. The athletes village is in the area of the MUN dorms. So it's awesome. Your athletes will be able to leave the dorms and be within or very close to the athletes village within a few-minute walk. The cafeteria is right in the middle of all of this. And she said basically between the MUN dorms, the cafeteria, and the athletes village, it's no more than a 5-minute walk to any of it. So excited for all of you, because this is a nice, tight area that you're going to be able to enjoy the games in, and hopefully that'll take some stress off travel times. The planned hours for the cafeteria are currently 6 a.m. to either 10 or 11 p.m. They're trying to decide when it'll stay open until. And if you've been to a games before, how it works is there's like a breakfast block, a lunch block, and a dinner block, and then there's grazing in between. So you want to really get to know when it's final, the cafeteria times, and make sure that you're hitting like mealtime windows. The grazing's great. There's still food out, but it may not be, you know, the amount of protein or the amount of whatever you're looking for your hungry athletes. Most venues will not need box lunches or anything. You'll be able to access the cafeteria. So that's also very nice. There's 7 sports that are actually at the main venue location. She quickly mentioned them and I could not write down that fast. So hopefully you already know, but if you're one of the 7 sports at MUN, amazing. No worry about transportation. You're going to be able to walk within 5 minutes to your competition venue, which is absolutely incredible. The furthest away are sailing and soccer, and they are 20 minutes away. So also for a games, like that's a pretty short transportation. So you're also very lucky, but sailing and soccer, you definitely will have some transportation required, and it's a good 20-minute drive. There are a couple venues that are 12 to 15-minute drive away, but most are within a few minutes, which is amazing. I think that was about all that she shared with us last night. Does anyone have any questions that maybe I could answer at this point about the Canada Games information? Like the St. John's specific? Okay, we also have access to Bianca to ask a few more questions. So if you think like this was from last night's group, some of the questions that they had, if you guys have specific questions that were not answered on that list, just reach out. And what I will do is reach out to her and make sure that I get a copy of it. So I can do that for sure. And what I want you guys using all this information to do basically from now over the next couple months is taking a look at your plan, integrating the information in. It's going to allow you to kind of more accurately complete your plan. And the last little nugget, important aspect to build in is your support teams. So for some of you, you may have access to a full integrated support team or an IST team. And for some of you, you might not even know what that is. So an IST team is a team of support professionals that are in place to support the coaches and the athletes perform. It could include a number of different things, including a nutritionist or a dietitian, strength coaches, mental performance coaches, physiologists, physicians, physiotherapists, massage, data people, and others. If you have access to this team or a number of these professionals, amazing, super awesome to have. Where are they fitting in your plan? Do they have a copy of your plan? Do they know you, the assistant coaches, and are they starting to get to know the athletes? The better integrated in your IST team is, like it is an integrated support science team, the more integrated they are, the better the result will be. So really ensuring now that they're built in, they're part of the team, and they're at as many like practices and things that they can be. And if you don't have access to this, still thinking that you shouldn't be on an island coaching and trying to figure all this out. So how can you surround yourself with support? You know, who are your assistant coaches? What have you assigned to them to work on? If you're an assistant coach, have you asked the head coach, what could you be doing to help? Canada Games is a lot. It's going to be a big 11 months moving forward. The more shared load across the shoulders of coaches, the better. So have you guys kind of looked at that and thought about it? Same with the managers. They have a very important role to play. Are they having their own like areas that they can own and work on or not? Your mission staff, which again, you may not have even met yet. Once you meet them and they've been named for your team, how are you leaning on that person? How are you working on that relationship to get the information to you? The more they have as far as your expectations and your schedule and team dynamic for the games, the better they're able to support you. I definitely found that out as a mission staff at the last games. Have you reached out to coaching support staff? So that would be people like myself within your own province, or if you're not comfortable, you know, like reaching out to myself, if you had questions, just asking general questions about the run up to the games or any of your coaching practices. Don't leave those questions unanswered or try and stick to Google. Like we have lots of people in the Atlantic that have lots of experience. So please reach out and we'll try and point you to the best person. And then, like I said earlier, just reaching out to the past games coaches. They have a lot of knowledge. Again, Canada Games have been going on for a long time. We have lots of people who I'm sure would be very welcome to help you. Oops. The last couple slides I'm going to go through today are some information from Dr. Laurie. Dr. Laurie works at Dalhousie and is a mental performance consultant who's been with us for many years. She worked with the Olympic gymnastics team coming into Paris. She was in Paris with Allie Black and the team as they went through their performance. And our last Canada Games cycle really asked for some information at this time around how to build the team and really start to get some team cohesion together. So the next couple slides, I'm going to give you guys the information. I mean, it doesn't come from me directly. You can ask questions and you'll have a copy of these slides to work through. Her belief is that building these performance teams really starts with understanding the individual. So what are each person's needs and getting to understand every player on the team or every individual athlete, what they're looking for out of this experience. So she does an exercise so you can get them to just write this down on a piece of paper and complete the sentence. For me to be at my best, I need blank, from whom, and because. And this can be a good opener as well when you're working with your athletes to really find out what it is that their need is. So they may need you or another coach to be their support system, or maybe they need you to not speak to them before you compete, or maybe they need a big pep talk because, and usually it's like a statement around because this is how it makes them feel, or this is what they're used to. Then taking all of those, getting to know them as the coach and assessing, can everyone's needs be met, by whom, and what is best for the team. So maybe you as the head coach can't meet everyone's needs, but maybe you can share the load around with others or understand a little more on what each of the needs are for the athletes and how those needs can be met. Then looking more broadly at understanding the team and how this is all going to come together. So knowing yourself, what your purpose of the team is, and then planning with the team what their overall purpose is and getting them to understand that. Clearly defining the team's goal. So what is the goal for this Canada Games? And then understanding, is everyone committed? Are there any conflicts with personal needs or goals that would get in the way of the commitment of the athletes to be part of this team over the next 11 months? So here's your sort of list of team tasks. Ask that you identify the individual needs of your athletes, the overall team goals, which should be created with the athletes, and then what is each team member's roles and what are the expectations of each team member? So everyone's going to have a different piece and a different role on the team. And have you talked about that? We did a call 2 nights ago with Jack Henready, who was the coach of the women's sevens teams at the Paris Olympics that just ended. That they were silver medal winners. And he just did one Tuesday night with us that'll be up, or no, sorry, Monday night. That'll be up on our YouTube, I believe, today. And he speaks a lot. It's about mid-call if you weren't on it. He speaks a lot about defining team members' roles. And what they did coming into the Olympics is they got rid of like the leadership team that a lot of team sports use. And they had something, the word is escaping me again. What did they call it? It's a political word. Cabinet. They created a cabinet. So there was like a leadership cabinet group. And the cabinet changed depending on kind of the event that they were going to. So I'll ask you if you're interested, like listen to that call. It was fantastic. He did such a beautiful job articulating how he does team leadership differently and defines each team member's roles differently and how he communicates that much better than I could. He also gets into the team agreements because he does a really, really great job with this piece. So again, I asked you go watch some of that. That was like the mid to the end of the call. He speaks about how to create those team agreements together. And then he goes through he communicates them, what does commitment look like, and what are the consequences and how he handled this. So yes, you have the information on this slide, but go listen to the talk from Jack because it was just really fantastic. And it really talked about these aspects and how important they are coming into an Olympic Games, but all of that will really help you coming into a Canada Games as well. And then the last quick one is around conflict resolution. So there will be conflict over the next 11 months, especially as you cut your team from what you probably have now, which is a core team, down to your final team. So this is some information shared to us from our mentor in emotional intelligence, Judy Regie, about staying above the line. So staying above the line means keeping your cool and keeping emotionally intelligent and calm in the moment when conflict arises, not going below the line. So the first thing she says is to get ahead and know that clear is kind, which is a quote she uses a lot. So it's better to be clear with the athletes now than be unclear and then leave them questioning. That will cause conflict. So it's better to tell an athlete now, I don't think you're on track to make this team unless something were to change. That is kinder than not saying anything, as a quick example. So some things that you can do are plan ahead and sit down and speak to your past coaches, your mission staff, collect as much information as you can about the games, about your team, about what's going on. What conflicts and issues can you alleviate now? Which are the ones we talked about earlier. So the more expectation setting and planning that you can do, the more you'll get ahead of potential conflicts and issues and reduce them or make it so that you don't have them. So talking about screen time, curfews, access to parents, things we talked about earlier. Then thinking about what's the plan if an issue arises, who do you and the athletes go to discuss? So who's your sounding board? You shouldn't be alone. So is there an assistant coach or a manager who you first go to talk about a conflict if and when one arises? And who do the athletes go? Because it should be a clear designated person that if an athlete has an issue, they go talk to blank. Could be an athlete on the leadership team or your cabinet, could be an assistant coach, could be you as the head coach, whatever you've decided. Just make a process. Then if conflict does arise, which, that does happen, make sure that you're truly facing it. So truly face the problem head on, don't dance around it. Understanding your timing and surroundings. So when talking about this, Judy talks about an example being if you were at a busy field at the time that the conflict arose, being aware of that timing and surroundings. So is now the right time to have the conversation? Or could I politely park the person and say, can we meet in 10 minutes over at this part of the field where it would be quieter? Because you're also going to have your attention divided, and it would be hard to have a tough conversation in like a very busy place, for example, where maybe athletes or others could overhear a conversation that you didn't want them to. So stopping yourself in that moment and thinking about, is now the right time and the right place in order to have this conversation? Working to not flip that lid. So Judy speaks a lot about flipping that lid, which is where we sort of lose it and let the emotions fly. So thinking ahead of the games, what if we are performing better than expected at the games? What is that going to look like for me as the coach? Well, what am I going to feel? Preparing yourself for that. What if we're not performing how we felt? What are the feelings that are going to come up then? And thinking about them ahead of time. When in conflict, using open-ended questions. So asking, being curious, understanding the emotions of others, and really digging for facts. Making sure to get things in writing if needed, and remembering past trainings that she's done. So this is just a reminder that we do have a great YouTube channel with lots of different trainings on emotional intelligence, conflict resolution that you can make sure to go back to if you're still curious or not quite sure what I'm referring to. And that sort of wraps us up for today. So I just want to say thank you. Happy Coaches Week again. Merci. I promised you my contact. You probably already have it because you're here. But if you don't, there it is up on the screen. As I said, all of you Atlantic Canadian Canada Games coaches, I'm here to answer questions if you have them. I'm here to support. I can find answers if needed. So certainly reach out if you're curious or you need more information. Those of you in Nova Scotia, there's also Allison, who's acting this time as a real support for our Nova Scotia specific coaches. So if you're a Nova Scotia coach, Canada Games, reach out to Allison if you want specific support. And then my colleagues in, PEI, reach out to Lynn Boudreau, New Brunswick, reach out to Gabrielle at Sport New Brunswick. And then in Newfoundland, you can reach out to Mark or, like I said, myself if you had questions, and I can try and answer them. And then that'll sort of end the formal part. I'm just going to stop the recording. But if you guys want